First up, we have Karim Najjar. Karim Najjar is the founder and principal of Najjar and Najjar Architects, and the professor at AUB's Department of Architecture and Design ever since 2009. In 1996, Karim was awarded a master's in architecture at the Vienna University of Technology. Soon after, he founded Najjar and Najjar Architects with his brother Ramiz in Vienna in 1999. Their innovative design approach soon found international recognition, winning them several international awards, with contributions to a variety of books and exhibitions in major cities such as Paris, Tokyo, and Berlin. His research interest is in advanced systems such as lightweight and kinetic structures. In 2016, he founded DI Lab, which stands for Design Impact Laboratory, with the purpose of engaging architecture and engineering students in the design and implementation of community-based projects in Lebanon and the region. In 2018, Karim Najjar founded the D4C, which stands for Design for Communities. This platform adopts an action-oriented research and design approach within a professional framework, acting as a catalyst for sustainable development in Lebanon. Let's give a warm welcome to Karim Najjar. Karim, the stage is yours.
Well, what else than talking about crises and opportunities in these days? Especially I want to think about what opportunities architects have in crises that we're going through. By looking at the crises that we've been through since I came back to Lebanon in 2009. I was before there, it was mentioned, in Vienna and practicing. And soon after, the refugee crisis hit Lebanon. So you ask yourself kind of, as an architect, what you can do, how you can contribute. Or the environmental crisis, and is there an opportunity to contribute to an environmental crisis as an architect? I believe so. And of course, the post-blast crisis that we're suffering from now, and the crisis it has caused, like the financial crisis and the crisis for the mazout and many others. So, if we think as architects of how to deal with crisis, we usually think of, okay, how can we find opportunities, or in a sense be opportunistic, and I think every architect is somehow opportunistic and needs opportunities to make a living and to find kind of, actually to practice. And so the question for Lebanon is, with all these crises plus architect, what are the opportunities? And as mentioned, one opportunity, of course, is to look for other markets, which is definitely what many have to do because everybody wants to make a living. But also it is a question of what is the role of an architect despite just practicing. I think that he has a responsibility to also be an agent for a cultural discourse. Or if we regard architecture as an intersection between the culture and communities, or as a form of cultural expression, then we have to ask about our culture. And if our culture is not only kind of going to Faqra and to Batroun and have fun and go, that's kind of what we are associated with, but also our culture is determined by crisis. And the question is, do we wait until the crisis is over, look for other opportunities, or are these crises kind of part of our identity? And if they're part of our identity, the question is, how do they reflect on the work that we do? So, because I think that what kind of architecture is about, kind of to reflect. There is a nice quote. I never really thought of it before, and don't know what it really means, or started understanding what it means. Beauty Will Save the World by Dostoevsky. And please don't, I'm not saying that I'm trying to present how to save the world here, but I'm like to talk about the role of beauty or the role of architects have, because I think that's aesthetics and form and expression is an important part, and for the role they play in society. I will not talk about my office. I will talk what I have worked on in the past 5 to 6 years, when kind of the crisis accumulated, and we start with the crisis of the refugee crisis. And as mentioned, I founded the DI Lab, the Design Impact Lab, to engage young architects, students, and graduates to take responsibility and to take action, actually directly facing the crisis and not going around it or trying to find niches elsewhere to practice, but taking the crisis itself as the challenge to design. Design for Communities was established later, where we actually also engage young graduates and professionals to be able to execute these projects. So we have developed a methodology which is it was grown organically. It's through trial and error, but in principle, it is to us the architect or architects are required in a crisis to enter the process earlier, which is, for instance, surveying or understanding the issues rather than just getting a brief. So this is something that we learned, or to assess the needs, that the needs are need to be understood. Usually in our traditional understanding, we get a brief, we get a program, and we start designing. But these two points, I think, are important. And then, of course, to respond through design. And another thing is to discuss and negotiate with the community, as this is also important if we talk about environmental and social design practice. And then, of course, to test and implement, and it's kind of a circle. Then you go and survey again, but now you survey or you monitor what you have created and done. I want to go through a few projects, more as snapshots. I will not kind of explain them in depth, but I will kind of explain or try to start a conversation about kind of the role in crisis, the role of architects, which is about aesthetics, which is about design, which is about kind of what transcends as an artistic approach, rather than understanding architecture in crisis only as a service. So this is a school that we have designed and implemented, which is Shams, is in the Bekaa Valley in 2016. And actually, the idea was to start to understand the conditions of the learning conditions, which were severe, and to see what can we do as designers. And we approached it from more or less a technical engineering angle to solve the problem of overheating of these classes and glare and the high CO2 emission by having earth ducts that run through the ground, cool down the air, and they are sucked out through a solar chimney that runs like a double-layered roof. We were, of course, not allowed to use building materials which are conventional, as it requires a permit. So we used sandbags and a framing system, and that can be dismantled. So this was the result, and I thought, like, talking about the opportunity, that we should take this to kind of a humanitarian agency and maybe have the opportunity to continue working and upscaling these the classrooms for refugees kind of in the region. So I was a little bit naive because I talked to the director of GIZ in Germany, in Frankfurt, and he said, like, yeah, well, everything you're doing is wonderful, but this looks too beautiful. So start thinking kind of what is the problem of being too beautiful. I said, but it's only $8,000, so it doesn't matter. He cannot present this to the minister in order to get funds for upgrading schools. So I think it's interesting that something like crisis is not attributed with beauty or with aesthetics, and then suddenly there is a problem where people start thinking kind of about aesthetics for refugee. Why do they need this if this is not kind of adequate? But if you look how it's operated, it runs well. It was kind of very good climate inside. We were able to cool down the classrooms 5 degrees only with passive systems, and it's actually very successful. All the students always wanted to go into this classroom amongst the other classroom because it's kind of very pleasant. And just to go back, I just remembered he said, like, it cannot be kind of the funds are difficult to get, because if he shows this to a minister, he would say, like, the minister might think that this is kind of a classroom somewhere built in Switzerland or in Sweden where it's difficult to justify, which actually made us proud, because why not? I mean, why shouldn't they have the same access to quality of spaces? Here is an outdoor area where we also mapped actually the functions of play, the different forms of play, active, passive, and created an outdoor area also kind of related to the refugee crisis. This is kind of a tensile structure that covers everything with flexible, furniture that can be moved, and this is also nearby in the Bekaa. From the same operator is the Kayani Foundation operating schools in the Bekaa Valley. And of course here the critique came again, kind of why such an exalted structure for refugees who have problems. Put the money somewhere in books, put the money in helping them, put the money in food and whatever. And maybe this relates a little bit to what I mentioned from Dostoevsky, is maybe this is also something worth to be discussed or considered beauty. And actually, it is very well received by those who are using it, because they identify and it's something dignifying to them, although it could have been probably built cheaper and less loud. But also what happened is that the host community who are kind of have a problem, so the Lebanese who have a problematic relationship to the refugees, go there and take photos for weddings. So I think it's also quite a successful proof that design can link and design can go beyond just functions if it's kind of built for social issues, because there is a stigma on social design. And of course it brings together, for instance, here our young architects and students and the craftsmen who work there. It's pretty exciting. And we took actually our experience, the odd thing is from this experience to a more formal building, which is the Baruch School in Baruch, the public school, that we rehabilitated. And it's just to show a beautiful modernist building that we brought back actually. You can see here left and right the different stages that we brought back. But also here we intervened into what we call like kind of this corridor and creating learning spaces that are more inclusive, that bring together different class ages and create kind of informal learning spaces. But here also we applied a system that's a passive system. Instead of installing double glazed windows, because it's very cold up there, we kept the old window and we just pushed another window layer to the front of the old window and created a buffer that acts like a solar chimney. So if you can see here, the slits in the aluminium, they suck in the air, and on the top, maybe you can see it. It's after it's heated, it is exhausted on the upper part. Actually, we reduced the costs of heating 50%. So this is kind of more to the engineering part, maybe not to the, but also the design itself, kind of we created a ramp that wraps around the school, and this ramp, which is kind of for disabled accessibility, became the playground. So actually it's also more inclusive that you create the ramp as part of the outdoor play and landscape, which wraps around the whole school. And that's how it's used now. So I think it's quite successful. So to get to another form of crisis, the garbage crisis, here you can see our students or young architects collect the garbage from the sea. That was 2017, another crisis. And we have built cages and put the cages up in Ihden, where we collect them. So you'd ask yourself, like, what is good for taking the garbage from the sea and putting them in cages? It was for a stage design. I would, for Mashrua Layla, that was meant to, the stage design was meant to create awareness about the crisis, the plastic, the use of plastic bottles, and it was staged, so it's more, the architect's role is here more to raise awareness. Otherwise, it would have been to solve the crisis. The architect's role might be a bit lessened because it's more about recycling and it's more an engineering issue. And after that, or during the concert, the cages released all the plastic and kind of went into the band and then from the stage down to all to the audience, so they were swimming in plastic again. So maybe this is kind of about aesthetics that might not change the world but can create awareness or save the world. Another environmental project, the Turtle Reserve or the Tyre Nature Reserve Hub in Sur. Also, we proposed to create kind of a hub that creates kind of a boundary where people can learn about kind of nature, the marine life in Sur, together with the NGO. And this was proposed, designed, and constructed like within the summer with students together. And I think it is quite appealing for the purpose of relating to a crisis, which is the environmental crisis that we have in Lebanon. And it's, I think, uplifting, it's encouraging, and it's functional because you can, since it's in the sand, you can just fold it together and remove it. So it's a kind of a kinetic or a scissor structure that's very easy to assemble and to disassemble. And just for the pictures and for the experience that we had, and don't know how to justify like the form because it doesn't resemble maybe a turtle, but it's also fun to work on these kind of projects. Here are the creators, some of my students, and I'm taking also a role in the construction part. So to the Beirut blast, as a response, we also mobilized young architects, students, to survey where they can find an opportunity, and that's kind of the approach to intervene in order to make a difference as architects. So that's kind of where we started. And one of the first projects was Crossing Together with the Latin Church. We took a shop and we rehabilitated the shop and created kind of a community center. Again, the critique was even from students, sir, it's kind of everything is going down and the country is so small, and they had like nation station, they all had plastic chairs, they were kind of thousands of soup kitchens, and we were kind of a little bit criticized for being kind of working so aesthetically, like here, and is this better? I don't know. And thinking of aesthetics while kind of during the catastrophe, and so that's the interior. And so I was asked this question by students. So kind of in this, if this is the correct response to a crisis like the explosion and people kind of having no access to medicine and food and so on. And I said, just wait a minute. And if you look at this area, this is the only community center or where community engagement is happening still today. All the others are gone. The plastic chairs are gone. Nation Stations is gone. It is the aesthetics that gave them a place. So come to almost the last project. Another one is on the Karantina municipal land. It is strategically between the Christian and the Muslim neighborhood. You see where the blue dot is. And the idea is we were able to, you see down here, it's the plan. It's the area, the building from Suklin, which is behind the wall on the Karantina side, to allocate this, and we are actually about to construct it. And the idea is actually to break this wall from the municipality, like a symbolic act, and open it to the community. Together, we worked with them on developing the program. So that's what I mentioned. It's a lot of communication and negotiation, and to create kind of a versatile community center with different functions. And a big courtyard in the middle, maybe resembling the central hall building or central house that is actually the community space itself. So this is kind of the initial render, how this wall is opened, and actually the street opens up, and you can just enter the space. Okay. Oh. I think now it's too late. If you haven't heard me, so at least you have seen the pictures. Okay, now the last issue I have mentioned, the last thing I have mentioned is energy crisis. Yeah. And I want to show a short movie.
البحر سميته ملك لأنه كانت الدنيا كلها بحر. نزل عشنا على البر وعم ناكل من خيراته. بنزل على البحر، البحر صار بالدم، يعني صار صديق إلي. والبحر بحسه بيشعر مع الشخص كأنه عم بيحكي البحر. ياخذونا معهم أطفال على البحر يصطادوا سمك. سمك كان خيرات فيه. ننزل بساتين، ننط بساتين لنوصل على شط البحر. اسمي عدنان أحمد العود، ابن بيروت دار مريسة، يعني بيقولوا لعين مريسة. عمري 71 سنة. عشنا فيها المنطقة من أيام جدود. كنا من زمان بس تنزل على البحر كان كل الشطوط فاضية. حشيش، التوتيا بالارض. هلا هذا راهن انقطع، ما عاد في شيء، الايام تغيرت. وصارت تطلع بنا ضخم 20 طابق و30 طابق. هالبنا الضخم هذا اثر على البنا الصغير. بالنسبة للتغيرات اللي صارت، في ناس تضرت وفي ناس انتفعت. نحن معترين صيادة بيعطونا اياها نص نص، 6 ساعات يا بالليل ويا 6 ساعات بالنهار. عم بتروح 12 ساعة الكهرباء. بيقولوا لك انه نحن عمرنا وطلعنا اصحاب الملايين، ما عجبك ارحل. كنا قاعدين بناية، مش بناية، طابقين صغار، بس في بلكون خشب. بلكون الخشب كنت واقف قاعد عليه، تبين البحر كله علينا. القهاوي على الروش تبين. بس طلعنا على الجبل صرت شوف البحر على التلفزيون، او بالمجلة. ما عدت يعني اذا في صورة للبحر بقعد بسرد عليها، قد ما بحب البحر. مشروع عيون النور تعطيه للصياد حقه. منظرها سلس وما معجق، والبحر من بيناتها مبين، يعني منه مغطايه مسكره الشطوط البحريه. مشروع عيون النور هو بيولد لنا كهرباء، مش كهرباء للمدينة كلها، كهرباء على مثل المينا عنا ما فيها كهرباء. بالنسبة للبحر ربينا فيه وعشنا فيه وكبرنا فيه، وما بنقدر نتركه، أساسا ما بنقدر نتركه.
Karim, thank you for this very enriching presentation. The video actually resonates a lot with the current situation that's happening, the sad situation that's happening. Going back to the presentation at the beginning of it, you were speaking about a German person that you contacted regarding the classroom, right? Was this person an architect by any chance?
No.
He was not?
No, he was the director of kind of this humanitarian agency, and I don't know his background, but definitely not an architect.
Because the first thing that our teachers teach us, our professors teach us in university is the user experience and how it has an effect, how the architecture has an effect on us psychologically as end users. So, which is why I got interested in knowing, curious to know whether he was an architect or not. But then again, he's definitely not a humanitarian one, and please quote me for this, because at the very end, it is the end user that's using this, and he should somehow be content in the environment that's being built. Don't you agree?
Well, I would not agree to say or to be judgmental whether he's humanitarian. I think he understood the situation that something, and that's kind of maybe something we should work on as architects, that if something is beautiful, it's not kind of, it's hard to link it to misery. So if you want to raise money, so he's probably more pragmatic than he's not sensible.
Mentality.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. If you're more pragmatic and you want to raise money and you want to argue for money for social costs, you have to show the misery and not the outcome that might look, and that was the point I was making, like any other or even a beautiful kindergarten that could be somewhere in Germany or in Switzerland or in Sweden. I think that's a problem. I don't know kind of how to change it, but we ignored. And in a sense, we were emboldened actually to say, okay, if that's the problem, we're not going to go down. We're going to go even an extra mile and make more exalted structures. If design is good for one, why shouldn't it be good for the other? It's kind of, if we talk about equity, if we talk about kind of that design, then it should not stop at any point. It should kind of, should give it all the time.
So we should be optimistic, we should be hopeful, and always be pushing ourselves. Always. And right now, when it comes to Lebanon, and specifically Beirut, do you still have hope?
Let's say it's difficult. It's hard to have hope, but if you embrace the crisis, and you know that you have to live with the crisis, and it becomes part of your culture. That's the point I was trying to make. Then maybe you're more hopeful because actually you have more purpose in doing something other than sitting and waiting until the crisis is over. So yes, I mean, I'm enjoying myself doing what I'm doing, although it's a horrible situation. But each time I go back to my office in Vienna, I feel much more alive when I'm here. Because, I mean, I'm privileged. I know I can travel, but and that's probably if I was a younger architect and, kind of have to make a living and have to have a future, it's a different situation. But although many people are leaving, at least for a certain time, and we are graduating like 1,500 students each year. So at least if they stay 1 year doing something for their country while waiting for their visa or the passport that they're not getting, it would make a difference.
Definitely. And now we have, I believe, some questions from the audience that someone would like to raise. Please let me know who would be like to asking the questions to pass on the mic to you.
Hello, Mr. Najjar. It's a very interesting presentation. I'm particularly intrigued by Iris, the structure that you built on the sea. I'm just I want to know how the mechanism works, how everything, yeah, how does this structure actually provide electricity? What's the science behind it?
Maybe it's not shown and it needs plans. It's propelled by waves, by a buoy that can move up and down. I said it like it's probably not the most efficient way to generate energy, but and that's kind of also the purpose of this lecture, to show that it's not about efficiency and engineering alone. It is also about kind of that we stay in our domain and narrate and reflect on us and on kind of our culture and who we are. If I would have to explain the whole mechanism, I invite you to come and I can show you the models, but you know, kind of where the joints are, it's a bit difficult to describe it. And it's a long time ago, I don't remember.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else would like to pose a question to Mr. Najjar? Okay, that's about it.
I'm relieved. Thank you.
Thank you.